We're back in the tent here today with Duncan, who's our gracious host today at RocketSpace. I love this place, and congratulations on all the success. And so tell us a little bit, who's Duncan, where are you from, how'd you end up here, how'd you build this awesome place?
Yeah.
How many more are you building? So thanks for making it.
Well, no, nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. So I'm originally Scottish. So my parents are farmers in Scotland, and I know this thing sounds like it's going to explode.
No explosions here.
No explosion. So I went through university up in Scotland, wanted to do agriculture, get into farming scene, and then agriculture sort of imploded as an industry. So I went into banking, became a derivative trader in London as a bit of a change, and then after about 4 years of that, realized it wasn't what I wanted to do, and I wanted to do something more entrepreneurial, and that's where I started my first company in London. So first company was called CityPro, and it was a CRM reseller. Did very well. Built that up and we sold that in 2000. And then I joined a friend's startup, which was called Message Labs. It did very well, and he sold that in 2008, and that's what we sold it to Symantec, and that. It's what got my interest over here. And so the first company was called National BLS, and it was a really simple idea, but failed to take into account one thing, which is any industry you go into has incumbents, people who are already in that industry. And we were going into the residential real estate market in 2008, and here in America there's a big sort of realtor, they're kind of agents movement, and they were pretty dead against my idea.
What was the idea?
So it was called National BLS. It was a reversal of the MLS. Okay. So it's an MLS for buyers, and we thought, the industry prices had been rising because there'd been a shortage of supply. In 2008, it became apparent that prices were going to drop heavily, and therefore supply and demand, everyone would be chasing demand. So we wanted to create a database of demand. So I spent some money on that, and we never got it off the ground, really. And eventually came to that really hard thing that an entrepreneur has to do, which is, cut your losses and concede that you're beaten. So did that in December 2010, and about 2 weeks later, January 2011, started RocketSpace. And thankfully, it's taken off like a rocket.
How did this whole thing come about? Like, was it just like a moment?
So there were a couple of things that were going on in the back of my mind to start RocketSpace. The first one was we'd seen so many things go to this as a service model. So software moved to software as a service, hardware moved to the cloud, which is effectively hardware as a service. And I just wondered why nobody was doing office space, and that was my starting premise, was to do office as a service. I just thought it would be that capex to opex shift would be a really attractive thing. The second thing was from the experience of the failure. National BLS was a company. There was a crowd of us just in a room on our own, in total isolation from the rest of the market, and I thought that was a really bad strategy. And so I thought, if anyone's starting, it's a very lonely sort of process starting a startup, and it would just be so much better if you could do it in an environment with tons of other startups. And then that kind of drove to the quality thing, that actually it'd be great not just to do it in the community of other startups, but to really gauge the quality of the startups you do it around. I think that really affects the outcome. You are a product of your environment. So that was right from day one. That was one of our focuses, was how do we create a really fantastic environment.
And so you were, I remember at that point there was maybe Parisoma, which is a small space. There was a couple of places.
Citizen Space, Parisoma,
But the co-working boom hadn't really started, and then I remember hearing that you guys are doing this 60,000 square feet?
We're 45,000 square feet here,
I'm like, these guys are crazy, but obviously now 2 years later, or almost 3 years later, like, you're in a packed house, and really high quality companies, events, and it really, you've built a community that you're now going to replicate in other cities.
Timing, I think so often timing is so fortuitous. I've met so many people who said, we tried to do this company, but we were 5 years too early, or, and you can see that even with big companies. all the tablets that came around before the iPad happened, and all.
Yeah.
There's just a timing thing sometimes that works, and we could not have been more fortunate. On literally January 2011 was the starting point for when it exploded. So yeah, we knew before. I'd kind of done this lean startup thing, where I'd run adverts on Craigslist, just fake adverts actually, testing the market for how much interest there was in RocketSpace, and I called that company 3PM, per person per month, PPPM, and I was getting tons of responses to these adverts, and then I knew it was going to be popular, and I mean today we get 30 to 35 applications a week from companies all around the world to come here. So yeah, I mean, we were lucky with our timing, definitely.
And how many companies are working here currently?
I think there's about 132, 130, something like that. But it's normally around that.
But you're moving into a bigger space.
Yeah, the whole plan was to expand into another 75,000 square feet. And actually, this building's now going to be torn down to be made into a new tower. So we're moving into 75,000 square feet. But I would think we'll be at by the end of next year, we should be at a couple of 100,000 square feet here in San Francisco. Wow. It kind of really works for us getting that size thing. The bigger the magnet, the better it is for everyone who's in it. It's like a dating site.
Yeah, totally.
If you've got 100 people in a dating site or 100 million people in a dating site, the results are far better in the bigger one. It's just better market thickness.
I mean, again, I live in the South Bay, but I come up to the city a lot. But how many co-working spaces are there in the city now?
I stopped counting when I heard of, I think we're at 44 or something, and I gave up.
Literally, like, they're all packed.
Yeah.
I mean, we work just opened a few weeks ago. Floor is done. They're doing the floor. So how do you differentiate yourself, and how do you again fill the house when there's all this competition? Because price is pretty much the same, I would say.
RocketSpace is probably a bit more expensive than everywhere else. Fortunately or unfortunately, I mean our differentiation is really driven around, we're purely for technology companies. Mm-hmm. So we are incredibly focused on that. We turn away probably 95% of all the applications, that come in here, and we also have a size limit in that you have to have raised at least one round of funding to get into RocketSpace, and I don't think anyone else has such tight, stringent things. But the quality thing for us is really, really important. So we'd rather have empty desks. I mean, fortunately, we've never had that situation, but we'd rather have empty desks than not have a good quality company sitting at it.
Interesting. And so, you're talking about expanding now internationally in other cities. Is the idea to really build a network where people can co-work in different cities when they're traveling, or is it like a global community? Yeah,
I think it's important to really understand. RocketSpace really focuses on what we call the innovation sector of technology.
Sure.
Now, by definition, only 10%. It looks like a pyramid, and it's the top 10% that innovates, and the remaining 90% that builds out that technology. So we're only focused on the innovation culture, and that's a very there's an enormous clustering dynamic of innovators. It's really beneficial to innovate around other innovative companies. So we're seeing these clusters form around the world. I mean, San Francisco's always had one sort of thing, but now we see it in New York, we see it in London, Berlin, all sorts of cities, and I would expect there'll be probably close on to 50 of them in total around the world.
Wow.
And our intention, we would define ourselves as the kind of stock exchange of tech, that nucleus to the environment. And so wherever the cluster forms, we'll go in and try and build out our campus.
Any specific cities on the roadmap?
We're as I say, kind of working to expand here. We're looking at London very seriously at the moment. We're looking at Toronto at the moment. We're looking at New York, we're just scaling that up. That it takes a long time. Real estate compared to tech it's a slow-moving animal. Cool. So we need to get quite a few things started before we get in there.
New York or London, both cities, really expensive. Does the model work the same, or do you have to tweak it a little bit, or do you just start smaller?
I think it's going to be really interesting. I mean, definitely there's price pressure in London. We see that it's not so much that it's expensive real estate, it's just the companies haven't raised as much money as they have here. You know, in the Valley, one of the things which is really interesting is it's very, very people focused. You know, it's all about getting the best UI, UX programmers together, and then what you have to do to get them where they want to work and whatever is kind of secondary. No, it's not, people don't worry about the cost of real estate here, but it's just far more important to get the people, and that focus doesn't exist elsewhere yet around the world. And so people are, people will say, well, we're going to work down in this area because it's a lot cheaper, even though it's going to make it harder to attract the best talent to go work there.
Totally. So through my travels in the Middle East, Tunisia doesn't have a co-working space.
Right.
Cairo has one that's actually kind of cool. It's got this rooftop kind of garden. There's a couple cool ones in Dubai. So there are people, starting to embrace this whole concept. But again, kind of what you're saying, when you have entrepreneurs who don't have the money to pay for it, then the business model, even if real estate is low.
I think co-working is slightly different to what we're doing here. You know, we're an accelerator here. We're focused on the quality and the later stage companies. Co-working, and it's the same in San Francisco. A lot of that is about getting people who would normally be working out of their spare room or their bedroom or some lonely environment to come in and work together. And as animals, as humans, we're social animals, and I think it creates a far more social environment. So that's, I think those sort of ideas will work anywhere. I think, they don't have to be expensive. It's just a better environment, to work at than working at home or working on your own. So I think that's got a strong future, but I think it's harder to do an accelerator. There's a lot more to just the space when we're working here.
And so along the road, what were some of the hurdles or problems that you came across?
It's every month, every quarter, you go, if we can just get to this point. I can remember the first couple of months we said, if we can just get to break even, then it's going to be so much easier. And you get to break even, then you're like, okay, if we can, if we can get it so we're producing, 10,000 a month in profit or whatever, then we would have money to pay for it. And it just never ends. And you're constantly dreaming about life getting easier, quieter, fewer emails coming in, more staff so you can handle the load. And and the opposite happens. The more staff, I think we've now got 15 staff here, and we are all busier than we've ever been. And I think that's that's an exciting thing. But we're exhausted. This is like running a 24-hour hotel. It's exhausting. So those are, it never gets challenged. And what's kind of funny about that is I was speaking to a company who are now doing, I think they're doing about 300 million revenue, and they're talking to us and saying, oh yeah, we remember when we were yours, like, oh my God, it felt so peaceful. Now we're doing 300 million and it's just chaos. And I'm like, geez, I don't know if I could survive another 5 years, of chaos like it is. But yeah, I mean, that's been good. I mean, there's always hurdles. As a small company, you have to accept you're going to get beaten around by big companies. And big companies have a lot more political weight or a lot more financial weight than you. Can come in and put a stop to things you're trying to do. A lot of people don't like innovation and change, and they'll say one thing but they'll go and do something else, and that's something you're constantly conscious of. But I mean, we've been, touch wood, we've been so fortunate with this business. Cool. We've really enjoyed it.
And is there an idea of like doing a fund along the side, or to consider something like that? Yeah,
I think without a doubt, we said at the start we weren't going to do the fund early, for the first couple of years, because firstly we wanted to build a reputation of getting good companies in here and focus on that, and secondly, if we had put any sort of criteria on companies coming in here, we wouldn't have got the very best companies. There's a number of people in here who've already sold their companies for $1 billion, or previous companies for over $1 billion, and they're not going to give up even 1% to you to come and sit in your space. With hindsight, oh my God, how I regret that, because we've already had 3 companies valued at over $1 billion that started in RocketSpace.
Wow.
You know, and you think, well, just 1% of that would be,
Well, that's how Saeed and Plug and Play.
Yeah, I mean they've exactly they've been incredibly lucky, and we are going to start a fund. I think it'll probably be next year, first quarter of next year, but it will be a follow-on fund. I think you have to be really careful. The last thing I want, as an entrepreneur, I just want to make this a brilliant place for entrepreneurs. It's a kind of, the rest of it kind of takes care of itself.
Yep.
But as soon as you have a fund, I don't want, every week we have a company closing a round of funding, and every day I would guess there's probably 5 or 6 companies pitching for funding somewhere in the ecosystem. And I don't want to ever, for an entrepreneur to walk in and say, hi, yeah, we're here to pitch you for funding, and we're sitting in RocketSpace, and for that entrepreneur to hear the question, well, has RocketSpace invested?
Exactly.
Because you've got to watch the signaling issue. So we'll never lead on a round, and I think it will be a totally separate business unit that we'll do.
Yeah. But so you call it an accelerator, but it's not that you have an actual formal program. You're almost you're facilitator of multiple programs, other accelerators and programs that are here.
Yeah, I mean, we actually, the true term that we put to it is innovation campus, because we're quite happy to host incubators in here or accelerators in here. We think the more, it's like every now and then you'll walk down the street and all the antique stores are on one street.
Yep.
Now they clearly all compete, but the fact that they're all there is, if you want to go to antiques, you'll go down that street. And we can have that same sort of principle that we're just trying to build that community. So we're a pretty open campus. If people come to us, say we want to do an incubator here and we think it's going to be the right quality and sort of idea, then we'll happily let that happen here. We don't see that as competitive. So yeah, we have this kind of campus mentality.
That's cool, because I mean, ultimately, I know quite a few of the programs. Nikolai, Labs, Chris, who's going to be on the show and join us a little bit. But to me, this is kind of like you said, an epicenter, a campus of different efforts that are all related, and that even they internally in RocketSpace are competing in a sense, like you said. But I think that just creates this synergistic energy that allows people to connect and learn and network in a sense. So
yeah, I think competing everywhere you go, there's competition, and if there isn't competition, you're probably not doing something anyone wants. So competition is a good thing, and we're pretty picky on who we allow in to do those sort of things, and we think everyone has their own focus and own speciality, and so it's we wouldn't necessarily have 2 companies doing exactly the same thing, or 2 incubators doing
Which
that.
brings up a good point. So the rise of the accelerators, incubators. So I was at Founder Institute early with Adeo.
Doing a great job.
There, we did like 400 companies, and at that point it was Y Combinator, Dave, Private Startups, FI, and Techstars. But now, literally, like I think there's almost 2,000 accelerators around the world.
Yeah.
What do you think about this phenomenon? And here's my thought. Like, I think there's going to be these verticalized experts who just run a program based on maybe real estate or solar,
fintech,
or whatever. So, what do you think about that? And then I want to get your thoughts on. I'll follow up with another question.
Well, I think any help you can get in starting a company for first-time entrepreneurs, I think there's a huge amount of help that people can get in starting a company, and so getting into an accelerator is, in many regards, it's a good thing. I think some of them are very greedy. I don't like, the amount of equity they take for the small amount of the small amount of kind of help that they give. But it's like anything. There'll be good ones and bad ones out there, and hopefully their reputation will drive the good ones to thrive and the bad ones to disappear. So I don't think there's ever a case of there's too many accelerators or incubators, because I think as time show we need innovation, we need entrepreneurs. So help them out there.
So next question.
Yeah.
By the way, it's not too hot because you didn't want it to explode. Inherently, though, isn't the accelerator model a bit broken? because even at Founder Institute, there's no short-term cash flow. So they used to say that 90% of these accelerators aren't going to make it because realistically, I mean, if and when there's a liquidity event, it's down the road, and so how do you hedge against that, or how do you solve that issue?
I agree with you. I think if you're working with a fund, if you're on a standard 2 and 20, 2% of 5 million is not really going to drive a big accelerator.
But I'm saying even without a fund, like most incubators or accelerators don't have a fund attached to them. But it's
right.
The not the 500 startups and not the tech stars, not what. But I know plenty of accelerators and programs that don't have a fund attached. That just mentorship and education. But I think if you have a fund, that changes the dynamic a little bit. But how do you solve that problem?
Well, I think it's like any business. Anyone can sell, $1 for 80 cents. You won't do it for long, but I think that is the case of what's happening in some of these incubators. They've managed to get their hands on some money, and they're going out there and they'll help people and so forth. But they're really not a commercially viable business, and they'll disappear. And we see, in a lot of existing ones struggling and so forth, and a lot of them will do additional things like events or whatever to try and generate revenue. It was another reason that we came at it from, we started with a real estate platform because we said we have to be a viable, profitable business, and if we can't get there, then we're not offering something that's valuable to people. If we can't charge a price that makes us a viable business, then we're not offering something of value. So, it's not a business; it's a hobby. And so, that was a kind of attitude we took right from day one. But there's a lot of walking dead that they've got to change.
I'm helping Angel Hack with their Hackcelerator, what they're calling it. And I like Greg and what he's been able to accomplish. And so he did it kind of the same, not the real estate, but the event, the hackathon, to generate revenue and sponsorship. And now it's not even accelerator; it's a virtual accelerator. And the team's coming here for 2 weeks. So I kind of like his model. And the other kind of cool thing is that it's core technology based. So traditionally, teams coming out of hackathons aren't really getting anywhere. But that's partially because that next stage of infrastructure or structure at all isn't there. So I really like what he's trying to do, and so I'm trying to help him with that. There will be people come up with all sorts of different models. I know of a space in San Francisco where people pay to sleep. They pay to sleep there, and you pay for your bed or the dorm, and you get a free place to work. And it's kind of, it's a totally different environment. I don't think there's any monopoly on the model. There'll be a ton of innovation around it. So maybe you can give us some advice as far as doing. So what we want to be is a regional accelerator of the Middle East, and this idea is picking one team that already has gone through an accelerator or ideally has some funding.
I think it's really important to understand that companies pre-funding behave very differently to companies post-funding.
Totally.
And if you're a post-funded company, being surrounded by companies who are pre-funded could be really annoying, really distracting. And it comes back to, the simple one for me is think of a soccer club. Now, if you're a really talented soccer player, you want to hang out with other really talented soccer players. Now, sure, you could go and practice with a B grade or C grade team, but they're going to drag you down to their level, or it's going to be really hard for you to excel at that. Now, the opposite is equally true. Yeah. So if you can put together this amazing team of people, then anyone who's interested in learning how to play soccer is going to be like, I want to go and practice with those guys. And you have to. That's the whole thing that we kind of focus on, and we did it right at the start. We had empty desks in the first month or two, and we were turning away companies because, I just said, think of it like a soccer team. If they're not kind of every person that comes in the door, just take that decision. Do they improve or weaken the gene pool? If they improve it, bring them in. If they weaken it, just ask them to go and play somewhere else. And that's it just comes back to a couple of really simple principles that we've got here, but it's worked for us. I'm not saying it's the only model,
No.
but it's just a model we've chosen.
Yeah, and then one of the things I know that you guys are big on is building the relationship with corporates and kind of building a bridge of funneling innovation to them, because inherently that's been kind of a broken model as well.
Yeah.
Tell me a little about that.
So it's driven from two ways, really. The first thing is we noticed that a lot of companies were building products to go out on existing platforms, whether that platform might be iOS, Android, it could be Twitter, Facebook, or whatever. And it was all around a conversation of, well, maybe every company's a platform. Maybe British Airways is a platform. Maybe General Motors is a platform.
Yeah.
It's just a way to reach the consumer, and this could be a really good way for startups to get to scale and decent results that they could then modify their thing on. So we were having those conversations at the same time as corporate started reaching out to us and saying, we come to you from two camps, really, fear and greed. Mm-hmm. And the guys who come to you from fear, they're all talking about disruption, we're worried about disruption here, or we can see disruption happening there, or whatever. And the ones that come to you with greed are saying, we're looking for innovation, and it's kind of, it's a really strange sort of thing, but you kind of notice it in their speech. But we said, well, this is a really cool thing, but our fear was that the startups would just do a lot of beauty parades.
Yeah.
And so the corporates would come in and say, maybe you could line up a couple of startups and we could see them. And we're like, we're not, we sit on the side of the entrepreneur. I don't want to distract the entrepreneur for a second until I know you're serious. So that's why we put the program in place. And the program is really a really lengthy filtration process with the corporate. And the corporates actually appreciate that, because now, by the time the corporate meets a startup in RocketSpace, they know about the startup, they know they're going to be interested, we've got the business unit in, and we've got over a 70% hit rate.
Wow.
70% of the startups that meet the corporates end up with either funding, a trial, a partnership, or acquisition.
Which is actually a really important point, because I think a lot of early stage companies either are focusing on just raising money or the product, and the reality is that if you can get one of these big brands to put their stamp on you, but beyond that, I think a lot of these deals end up being marketing dollars that then spend on the startup, so you get free publicity, and
it's
very valuable.
I think the Valley is really bad for people to say we have to go and raise money. Oh my God, we need $500,000 to see us through to the end of the year, or to get us into the next stage. Whereas, and so often you could go to a corporate and say, we've got this built and this is what it's going to do, and if you put in an order now for $100,000 or $200,000 and pay us up front, we'll give you a 50% discount or whatever. Mm-hmm. You can actually get the money without giving away any equity. And for RocketSpace, we still haven't given away any equity. We haven't raised, we have raised some money, but we did it through debt. But we've just used all sorts of companies that have had a vested interest in us and done deals and got it.
Aligning interests, basically.
Exactly.
That's interesting. So tell us we like storytelling.
Right.
So tell us a story of something that you experienced here. Some of the topics that we talk about are like another pivot, or chief janitor, or first firing, or
oh my goodness, oh God, there's kind of so many sort of bits and pieces. I think one of the really cool things about RocketSpace was it started with just 2 or 3 of us. Mm-hmm. It was all when I started the company, it was just me in here, and I was doing a bit of everything, and I couldn't get out, and I couldn't, I was just kind of so busy in the hustle. And people would walk in, and I'd get talking to them, and I'd say, well, you can start work, and why don't you, and so forth. And Mike Bowie was our first tech guy, he was the first guy to join, and Laura Kelly, who was working for someone else, and we got chatting. I said, you should join us, and so she did. And what Mike and I would do would be would work all day with the clients and stuff like this, and then in the evening we'd have food here, and then we would work literally all night until 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning, building furniture. So we physically every desk on the first 3 floors, Mike and I built ourselves, and we had to take all the cardboard off, and we kind of got into this process where, because when furniture arrives, it's all brand new furniture, and when it arrives, it's just enormous amounts of cardboard, and half the night we're just taking all the cardboard out to get the pieces, and then the rest of the night we're screwing the pieces together. And we noticed that there were people driving around in pickup trucks picking up cardboard for recycling and taking them off. And so we approached one and we said, listen, you and your guys come in here, you take all the cardboard off our furniture and you can keep the cardboard. And they were like, this is yeah. So we outsourced the removal of the cardboard, and then Mike and I were just screwing the desks together. And then we were kind of thinking, maybe we're giving, how much is a ton of cardboard? Could we make money off the cardboard? But we used to go up to what's the van rental place, and there were people standing at the gates, U-Haul, and there were people standing, and we'd pick up a couple and bring them down and say, right, we'll give you a job for, here's some cash or whatever, and we need you to take all this furniture, and eventually we had a kind of consistent crew who started building the thing. But during the nights, the things which went on in here were just ridiculous, with us trying to, when you're entrepreneurs, you have to do it yourself. And we were just The Walking Dead. We were so tired and so trying to get it together. But we had Laura, who would make sure the place is great in the morning. She would come in and we'd shoot off to bed and get some sleep. But it's just, I still love those days, because, that's what it's all about. Right? Yeah, I couldn't do it now. I'd just be hopeless at it now. But at the time, you really feel like you're building something. And, cool. So we used to have all sorts of pickup trucks waiting outside for their cardboard to come and take away.
Awesome.